Welcome back to the Command Your Brand Show. I'm your host, Jeremy Ryan Slate, the CEO and co-founder of Command Your Brand. We have our clients to appear on some of the biggest podcasts out there. You can check us out over at commandyourbrand.com. And I'm very intrigued for the conversation we're going to have today because we're going to be asking a few questions that I don't know if are permitted on the proper internet. So I think we're going to have a great conversation today. Our guest today is Ryan Dalton. Ryan, thanks for hanging out with me today, man.
Hey, glad to be here. Thanks for having me on, Jeremy.
Ryan, so for people that may not know who you are, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do, man.
Yeah, for sure. So my name is Ryan Dalton, and I'm one of the co-founders of Closed Horizon. And we run a marketplace for truth. So I think the best way to describe it is like GoFundMe for truth, where someone can create a campaign about a question that matters a lot to them. Big question, small question, whatever it is that they don't have information about. And they can crowdfund a reward for that information and then pay sources who provide direct knowledge of whatever question they're trying to answer.
So the thing I'm interested in is this isn't your first time doing something like this. And I'm curious kind of where this reward system came from and kind of what your experience has been that's led you to this.
Yeah, so I started my career as a lawyer and then spent most of that time in the counter-trafficking world doing human trafficking law and policy. And I later became a federal agent for the State Department and did that for about 5 years as a criminal investigator and then later on their tactical crisis response team. And then the rewards became a part of my work after I left there and worked for a defense contractor, where the mission of the team that I was on was to support the Rewards for Justice Office at the U.S. Department of State. And this program at the Department of State is responsible for administering the U.S. government's reward programs. So say that you have Bob Bad Guy of Bob's Terrorist Network, pick your bad guy, and the national security agencies convene and say, we're willing to move this guy forward for a $5 million reward. The Secretary of State signs that reward and authorizes it, and then it goes back down to the Rewards for Justice Office, who then is working with the company that I worked for to advertise that reward and then solicit information about those individuals with people who have direct knowledge of their locations, their pattern of life, and ultimately be eligible for a substantial payout, and usually in the millions of dollars. And my co-founder and I looked at this and said, this is a very effective model for finding truth and think that it can be replicated for anyone's question at any level, big or small, for whatever anyone is trying to do, whether it's, find, if someone vandalized your business, who was it? If someone cheated on due diligence records, if you have something major, like our first major campaign is whether Epstein left that cell alive, right? So big or small question, there's people out there who have information that can ultimately do the right thing in the world. So.
Well, let's start there because that was one of the things when you and I first connected, I'm like, can you say that on the internet? And we're taking a look at the Jeffrey Epstein case, which is one of the first main one you guys are running a campaign for. So what do we know around that? What do we think and what does some of the information out there lead us to believe about, I guess his whereabouts or his livingness or unlivingness?
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of the tactful way to answer that so that YouTube doesn't get mad at us.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting to see what YouTube does. So far, they've been friendly to this question. We'll see how long that sticks. We did a deep dive into the files out of really initially personal interest and arrived at the conclusion that the files tell the story that he left the cell alive. So you're really left with only 3 options. Either he was murdered, or he killed himself, or he left the cell alive. There's not another option that is really on the table. Of the 3 there, the facts, the files, the history here, everything points to the answer with the fewest problems is that he left the cell alive.
So I guess from that perspective, then where does he go? And I guess what things in the files lead you to believe that?
Yeah, we don't know where he went, so we can't say that. I wish I could tell you that, and that's the reason for the reward offer for for Epstein, information about proof of life. We're willing to be wrong about this, but I don't think that we are. I think that it is really convincing when you look through the evidence. And there's some major pieces of evidence in this cover-up that were not handled well by the people trying to protect Epstein's criminal network. And we catalog that information in a visual way on our website, epsteinisn'tdead.org, where we start with who he was and why it's possible based on the connections that he had, and walk the reader through all the pieces of evidence that we source from the files themselves, not from, conspiracy forums or Reddit or 4chan or wherever, but directly from the file themselves, and catalog that evidence in a way that makes a claim and then gives the source, makes a claim, gives the source, and walks the reader through it. And there's some evidence there that we find deeply compelling.
So I guess the question I would have then, Ryan, is, because you mentioned kind of the conspiracy side of things, and I feel like that's an easy way to kind of take something like this and pigeonhole it at the same time. How do we get around something like that at the same time? Because these are questions a lot of people have, especially if you're somebody that's heavily online. These things are talked about a lot. I don't know that they make it kind of totally to the normie realm of things, but I feel like conspiracy can very often pigeonhole these things. And I guess, how do we get around that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think conspiracies for a lot of people are entertaining, and so they get clicks and they're interesting. Our angle is what is true. And if it takes us to a conspiracy, then so be it. We don't shy away from that word, because all a conspiracy is, by the legal definition, is two or more people agreeing to do something unlawful. So in that sense, they're very common. And we try to talk to the normies about this kind of concept that as the reward for doing your conspiracy grows, the complexity of your conspiracy will also grow with it. And that's what we see here, is that there's multiple people that appear to have agreed to do something unlawful, which has helped him out of that cell alive.
So on the site, you guys actually have a timeline, which I would recommend people go and check out because it's extremely interesting. Are you able to kind of walk us through some of those pieces that lead you to believe, the evidence points otherwise?
Yeah, for sure. So the first thing that we looked at in creating this timeline is giving it a disclaimer. And we said, listen, when you look at evidence as a former criminal investigator, your duty is to arrive wherever it takes you, regardless of how you feel about it. And the pieces of evidence carry different weights. So some of them are very substantial. Some of them are less substantial. On the totality, they paint a picture. And any one particular piece of evidence by itself can be explained potentially with a prosaic explanation. Oh, it could have been this or it could have been that, right? But when you put them all together, it tells a story that you have to contend with and then really understand. And we begin that story with understanding who he really was. And there is a lot of information in the public about who this guy was, right? But I think the important piece that we need to understand is he had accesses that the average person doesn't. And I don't just mean money and billionaire associates. The FBI, in his arrest, this is pre-2019, this is before his death, did a search warrant at his Manhattan home. And in that home, they found a bunch of things. But one of the interesting pieces to us was they found a passport that's an Austrian passport with his face and a alias on it. So not his real name, but also with entry and exit stamps indicating that this was used.
Wow.
Yeah, that's how we felt. And this signals a level of access to the people who can create fake passports and usable fake passports, not just ones that are novelties.
Yeah, because you're not, like, obviously you're not just getting on an airplane with something that isn't legit, and especially if it's been used several times. That's a real kind of, to me, that really steps out.
That's how we felt. So he has this passport that was used for actual travel under an alias. Now, who does this and who can provide this? Well, spies do this. They have passports under different names, intelligence assets, access agents. And who can create the passports? Governments. People that have consular authority to issue passports. So we know that from the jump about him is just understanding that he had a level of access into governments and to resources that would allow him to potentially escape in a circumstance like this. Not only access to people who could help him, but the actual government identity documents to make it possible.
And in terms of that, I guess what other types of things in terms of evidence on that timeline did you guys see? Because
Yeah, so
the passport to me is pretty shocking. But obviously, I guess he would have to have another one if he left the country or whatever it might be as well.
right. Well, then we know that fast forward to he's in jail and he meets with his attorneys up to 12 hours per day. So this is really well documented. He spends lots of times with his attorneys. And what he's doing during this time is creating a final will and trust. And this is called the 1953 Trust. It's named after his birth year. And it puts under difficult to ascertain beneficiaries $577 million of his estate. There's people that, get things out of his will that are in the public record from the files. But then there's also the beneficiaries of his trust, where it's structured in such a way that if I was to fake my death, this is exactly how I would do it. I would make sure that all of my finances are indirectly accessible in some way after I die. So 2 days before his alleged death, the 1953 trust is executed and the will as well. So he has structured his entire estate to not go through probate, which is the process of administering the estate upon the death of the person who controls the estate. Instead, it goes through channels that he works with his lawyers to make sure it's really neatly buttoned up. And once his trust is signed, he 2 days later dies. Now, the way that it's structured doesn't seem to indicate someone who is in this state of despair. They are despondent about life. They're willing to throw it all in, and they're willing to just kill themselves. It indicates someone who is structuring a state to be useful after they escape.
So there's also some cell notes that exist as well, and that might indicate the fact that he escaped. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. Yeah. So this is our smoking gun. So what we know is he had these accesses and resources that were available, and then he moves all of his money around, and he has these meetings with 12 hours a day up to with his lawyers. And then he allegedly dies, and recovered from his cell after his alleged death are 2 notes. And we have labeled this card on our website, the smoking gun.
Mm.
And we believe this to be the smoking gun because it evidences intent to escape. And we show the smoking gun, the evidence itself. You could pull up the notes. You can look at this information. Don't take my word for it. In fact, don't take my word for any of this. Go look at it yourselves. And on these handwritten notes recovered from his cell, they're on legal paper. And there's discussions of, there's like drawings and scribbles that show his mental place that he's in and what he's thinking about. One of those is red notices. Do you know what a red notice is?
Is that like something that's like a burn after reading, or what's a red notice?
A red notice is an Interpol notice that a fugitive is loose.
Wow.
So there's a whole bunch of text on this legal note or legal paper. And at the top of it, it says red notice, and it's circled and it's underlined a bunch. Now, why would a person who's about to kill himself be concerned about a red notice from Interpol? It's interesting, right?
It's very interesting.
And there's other pieces on there that are, in our analysis, more interesting. He has jet versus prop written on there. So is he going to leave on a jet or a prop plane? What kind of aircraft is he leaving on? The nearest airport is Bradley International Airport, and it's got a drawing of the airport that's on there. It says Brad in big letters. So he's thinking about the nearest airport. He's thinking about, am I going to leave on he's thinking about a jet or a prop, right? So what kind of plane would actually be moving from the airport? Red notices. And then it talks about guards, the words guards written on there. So thinking about guard patterns, blackmail, and then a dollar sign. Like, is he going to be able to get money if he leaves, right? He's got a long blackmail list. It's got the word blackmail written on there and believed to be in his handwriting. And then it's got some language around like various countries. So SA is on there. We don't know what SA means, but we assume because it's next to Nigeria, he's thinking about, okay, now where do I go? SA, Saudi Arabia, Nigeria is thinking of places that he potentially could be. It has LSR on there, which is an aviation phrase for last stop routes. And these are routes that conclude an aircraft's pathway that often have fewer restrictions on immigration and customs, which would be very beneficial for someone who's a fugitive. Most notably, of these two notes, on the second note, if you flip it upside down, it says jail out equals 10. And he allegedly died on August 10th, 2019.
Wow.
Yeah. And no one's talking about these notes, which is
Well, to me, the thing that's surprising, Ryan, is it shows a high level of sophistication, right? Like something that a normal businessman or investor like really wouldn't know. You know, maybe some of these terms like airports and prop planes versus jets and things like that, but some of these things written in here show a high level of sophistication, and it makes you really wonder who is the guy.
Right. That's how we feel. We watch this and think, okay, who really was he? Was he manufactured for a specific purpose? Was there a someone above him that he reported to that was giving him the resources and accesses he needed to accomplish a mission? The evidence seems to point to this, and that kind of gets into speculative territory. And so
Sure.
there's evidence, there's pieces of evidence, but these people that are resourcing him for sure have the ability to extract someone from a friendly facility.
Well, something that isn't speculation that's always been a bit strange to me about this whole case is the Donald Barr Bill Barr connection, right? Like to me, that's extremely strange that he has a connection to somebody that's previously in intelligence, but then also the attorney general at the time that he does pass. What do you guys make of the Bill Barr and Donald Barr connections?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? The public statements we also catalog on there as well. And AG Barr comes out and he's initially very concerned about, I think the word used was irregularities around what happened in the correctional facility with Epstein. And fast forward, and he tries to just say everything is normal business as usual, no problem. There's no addressing what irregularities were there. What did he see? What were the problems? It's no, everything looks fine after some time elapses. So it begs the question, either he changed his mind or did someone get to him and say, hey, we're going to just make sure that this is pushed out of the public eye. Let's not bring this up anymore. And I think that's probably the case.
And this is a bit of speculation, so I'll leave this on me, not on you. But the thing I personally found strange is like somebody like Dan Bongino, who for years talked about not believing in the Epstein case. Then once he gets in position, he's totally in agreement with kind of the state line. That always seemed a bit strange to me, that there has to be something, doesn't mean it's insidious, but something more to the story.
Yeah. So I think this is a really great, a great line of thinking that responds to not just him, but also Kash Patel and even President Trump, where he campaigned on releasing the Epstein files. That was a major campaign promise. And then he gets into office, and all we have seen from the DOJ and the FBI is insistence on a cover-up. And that continues to be the case now.
Well, and we're even recording this as last night, Thomas Massie lost his primary election. And was it the Epstein, I forget the name of the act, but it was the act that he was pushing to basically get the information out there. That became kind of a big feud between even him and the president, which to me, someone that would want disclosure, that's kind of weird.
That's right. You would think that the president would support this, but it looks to be like it was the number one reason that he supported the primary of Massie and got him basically out of office. It seems like he would be supportive of getting the Epstein files out there, but he's threatened even now to primary the people supporting Massie. He's threatened to primary Boebert, and that's just another Epstein Transparency Act supporter that he's got his crosshairs on now. So why? Like, what is the reason for this about face between his presidential run and his policies now that he's in the White House? And I think it points to this overall scheme of a leverage campaign that's been highly, highly successful. It was a pre-internet intelligence operation that has not survived the internet. And so podcasts like this and people that are seeking truth and people that are able to dig this up, the release of the files, could not have been done pre-internet. It just wasn't possible. Information was very tightly controlled. And so I think that what we're seeing is a information collection and intelligence blackmailing and leverage campaign that did not survive the age of the internet.
Well, and once again, I'm not an expert, so I've been kind of consuming other people's viewpoints that seem to know a little bit more about the situation than I do. But even looking at somebody like Mike Benz, when Mike Benz on Rogan not too long ago was talking about it, he was saying that I think one of the big things that the argument in the public space has been is like, which country did he work for? And it kind of seems more like he worked for whoever, whenever, whatever was beneficial, right? Like whatever global cause was happening. I think a lot of arguments that are put out there to actually get us off the trail. Is that something you've seen as well?
Yeah, I think that the evidence points to he was a access broker and he worked for intelligence agencies. I don't know who was his like primary sponsor, who was the intelligence agency that he worked with closely. There's certainly a lot of connections to Israel's Mossad. And there's connections to the CIA, and we see MI5 and French intelligence in there as well. So it's hard to know if he's the product directly of one of these agencies or if he works for some kind of supranational power structure that is able to broker access between all of these players to achieve whatever their ends are. By his own language, he admits to work for the Rothschilds in the emails. So that's a whole different rabbit hole, but that is an admission that he makes to a highly well-connected family that could be advantaged by having an access broker.
Well, and the thing that interests me about Closed Horizon looking into this is at the same time, I think there's a lot of people that do great investigative work, don't get me wrong, but there's a lot of people that their investigative work typically tries to lead to one cause, whether it's the British or the Russians or the Israelis. Like they often have the ends in mind when they're trying to research something. So to me, the idea of actually looking into it a lot deeper makes a lot more sense with kind of trying to take some of that bias out of it. And I guess for you guys, this is a crowdfunding campaign. It is something that's active. How is the campaign doing? And at the same time, what will the actual process look like once you guys have kind of reached the funding?
Yeah, for sure. So the cool thing about rewards is that they're a persistent mechanism for justice that will stay active for as long as the reward is established. And what we've done is we've set up a reward campaign for the Epstein Isn't Dead campaign. There's about $41,000 in it right now. And as every dollar increases in there and people say, yes, I believe in this, I want to see justice here, and they contribute to it $1, $5, $1 million, whatever that number is, it gradually grows. And then secrecy has a price. And the cool thing about rewards is that they incentivize inner circle betrayals. So if you are someone who is protecting information, you're going to have a network of people who have knowledge of the secret you're trying to keep. And for Epstein, it's billionaire associates. They're not really going to be persuaded by whatever reward we can get in there, right? But it's logistically complex to hide someone. And so you're going to have contractors and medical professionals and drivers and maids and lawn keepers who would have knowledge that this is Jeffrey Epstein and he's alive. And so as that reward pool grows, people then can come forward with information that's direct knowledge of proof of life and be financially compensated for the information that they give, should it be determined to be eligible and true.
Well, and obviously we've spent a lot of time on Epstein here because it is a very high profile case. It is something that you guys are putting a lot of attention on. But when you look at Closed Horizon as a platform, I guess what do you guys hope to achieve, by having a platform such as this?
Yeah, well, we want to give people access to getting information that they otherwise don't have a tool to get. It's a tool for people who are trying to find the truth about things that matter to them. So, for example, Epstein is a really big case. That's not going to be something that most people make a campaign about.
Mm-hmm.
What most people will be interested in is things that directly affect their day-to-day lives. So if I believe that someone has broken into my business, I own a storefront and someone has broken in and they've stolen all of my merchandise, and I make my police report and nothing happens. I then can say, all right, well, I'm going to create a closed horizon, and I'm going to create a campaign for this, publish it on my social networks, have friends and family share it. And as people put in that reward, it grows to $100, $1,000, $10,000. And then someone in that community, it's like, I know the guy that did that, and I'm willing to go tell the people who are the victims of this crime that this is what happened. And it doesn't even have to be a crime, but the outcome is that you're able to connect someone who wants information to people who have direct knowledge about the truth of that information. And this can be applied in many different use cases. You can have, like there's communities that have like a beautiful oak tree in the middle of their town square that someone poisons and it dies, right? Like, who did that, right? That's a simpler example, but those things happen and people care about them.
Yeah.
And putting up a reward poster on your streetlight throughout town is really an old school way of doing something that can be modernized and made accessible to people so that they can securely submit information as a source on a zero knowledge architecture platform where we can't even see what's exchanged. And so it's a safe way for people to come forward with the truth about something and be paid for it.
Well, Ryan, I really enjoyed this conversation. And if people want to get involved, they want to find out more about what you're doing, how should they find you? How should they connect with you?
Yeah, check us out at closedhorizon.com. You can see the Epstein campaign at epsteinisn'tdead.org. And we'd love for people to go check it out and draw their own conclusions.
Very cool. Ryan Dalton, thanks for hanging out with me today. And for those of you out there watching this, don't forget to like this video, leave us a comment, and smash the subscribe button. If you're listening to the audio version of the show, give us a subscribe in Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And those reviews really do help. So please leave us one. And we will catch you guys next time.